Hello and welcome to our Planning with Purpose class. I'm Michelle and I'm the host for the entire course as well as today's class. If this is your first time attending, please check out our YouTube channel to get caught up on our other classes. And they can be really, really helpful because how I've structured the course is we tend to create something, a stack of information, and then we start stacking more onto that, or we pull information from those prior classes. And so the goal, or the ultimate goal, is to create a structured, easy to update, and shareable system of your entire financial life. And it includes things like your bank accounts, whether it's banking, investments, and expenses, passwords and login credentials, any of your valuable information, home inventory, account titlings, estate documents, everything. And that way, it's not only keeps you organized or financially organized, but it's also a great gift to leave your loved ones, because they'll have everything packaged up very nicely for them and they don't have to search for everything. Today, we are going to be focusing or centering our attention a little bit more on our medical stuff. Now, last time we went over some of the estate planning documents, and that, the wills and your powers of attorney, which was your durable and your medical power of attorney. And now we're going to look at just a little bit more on the medical side of that. And the first one we had touched on was your medical power of attorney, and that just makes sure that you provide or appoint someone to make medical decisions in your absence if you're unable to make those, whether it's for incapacitation or maybe you're in surgery and a decision needs to be made. Then someone needs to speak on your behalf, and so that's what your medical power of attorney does. You do want to make sure that it is current. This is especially or particularly important if there's been a new marriage or a death. You want to make sure to update some of that information to make sure that you have a person that is not only alive and capable to do that, but they're also able to do that for you. You certainly don't want to leave your ex-spouse as your medical power of attorney, especially if it was a really messy divorce. It's helpful to make sure that someone local, that way they can, obviously if they're not local, they can still handle business over the phone, over Zoom, something like that, or some video chat. But to have someone local, it makes it really easy to do that as well. So make sure you have one on file first, and then it's current, and then make sure you provide that to the person that you're giving the power to. If you just do it and stick it in a file cabinet, then you can have it fully executed. But unless that person has the document, it's very hard for them to make that decision for you. You may tell them that that you've appointed them, but the hospital and medical staff is going to want to see that medical power of attorney and put in your file, proving that you haven't revoked that and provided it to someone else. And so make sure that it's current, and make sure that you give it to the person that you are appointing as your agent. Another important document is your HIPAA authorization. And this, oftentimes when you go to the hospital and you're being admitted, they'll ask you, do you want us to release any information to anyone? And you can list people on that admission form. However, this is usually a per admittance. So each time you get readmitted, they'll ask you that same information again to make sure that it hasn't changed. In fact, when I would take my dad to Dallas, every single month, they wanted a new copy of the power of attorney and a new HIPAA authorization. And so we had that printed out PDF'd, and then I could email that to them to save time on that. It may be a good idea to create a personal medical journal as well. This provides your agent that you've given that power to make medical decisions on your behalf, kind of a rundown of everything that is you medically, whether it's what surgeries you've had, what medications that you're currently taking, the dosage, the frequency of those medications, and if you're allergic to anything. Are you currently being treated for any other type of illness? And that can be really important because some medications can counteract each other. And you certainly don't want to be, or if they're not sure that you're taking a certain thing, they may be doubling something up. So we want to make sure that they have that full gamut of information to know what they're actually dealing with. So it's a good idea to have that personal medical journal. This could be something as easy as like doing a doc or a document on Word or OneDrive, and then sharing that file with someone. And that way you can keep it up to date. So any changes that are made, they can access it and know exactly what you're on. Also important to maybe share your medical wishes with someone. And this is usually done through like giving an advanced healthcare directive, often referred to as like a living will. And that you can state whether, what you want done. Do you want to be resuscitated? Do you not want to be resuscitated? And do you have a DNR on file, or have you signed a DNR? Now, it's important to realize that living wills are not valid in every state. So make sure the state that you're in, that they do have a valid, or that you do, they accept this. And also, if you travel frequently, maybe you spend half your time in one state and half your time in another, make sure that whatever state that you're in, that your power or your advanced directive or living will is valid in that state, because there may be certain language that that state requires to be listed in there. And that way you can incorporate all of the pieces of information into one. Certainly don't want to do two. You don't want to do one, let's say since we're so close to Oklahoma, you don't want to do one for Oklahoma and one for Texas, because usually it says on that, this is my new one and I'm revoking any one that's, in the past. Well, which one? Which one did you sign first? Because one's going to revoke the other. And so you don't want to have two separate ones, but you would want to make sure that the language that's being used within that document can cover both of those states. And so, or as many states as you travel to on a frequent basis, to make sure that you're covered. Again, do not use two, and make sure that whatever state that you're in does accept that. You'd hate to go through all this work and your state's just like, we don't care what it says. And then that kind of goes back to your medical power of attorney to say, can you make this choice or this decision for this person? So it kind of puts it back on them. Now, of course, they can then look at what your wishes are and see to what extent you want any type of life support type of system, and then they can make that medical decision for you. But if you've already laid it out and, have provided that to your healthcare provider, then they know and they have it in file, and they know that it's directly from you and not just what your medical POA is saying. Life support wishes, to what extent do you want that to happen? Some people would like to be resuscitated, but they may not want to be kept on life support measures if a physician has deemed them brain dead. And so if there's no brain activity, do you want to be kept alive, and for how long? To what extent do you, I know it's hard to think about, but at some point a decision needs to be made. And even with a ventilator and stuff, if you have a breathing tube, sometimes the breathing tube itself can deteriorate tissue and make it even more difficult for you. Some people want to be, if it's deemed brain dead, maybe keeping you alive, at least till family members can come into town to say their final goodbyes. If that's something that you want, specify it. So what type of support, and then how long that you would want that for. Some don't want to have a feeding tube at all. They don't want to be put on a ventilator at all. If they're deemed brain dead at all, then it's like pull the plug immediately, shut it off. And so it's important to determine and notate what your wishes are for that. You can also include in that advance directive or living will whether you want to have any type of organ donation option listed. It's always important to know of these things before you're cremated or buried. You don't want your, this document to be found after the funeral. It may be important to provide that ahead of time so it doesn't mess up what your plans are. So it needs to be made known before the funeral. And a lot of times, if you're doing a specific organ donation, then that's kind of a time sensitive issue. And they need to start prepping for those types of things if they see that you're going downhill or it's kind of a terminal thing for you. At what point, is the sooner the better that they will know that, or the sooner the better for them to find that out. And also, if you prefer, your final resting place, whether you want to be buried or cremated, and discuss those wishes with the person that is going to be in charge of that. One of the things that we did with our family is when my grandpa died, my grandma wanted to keep his ashes in an urn on the fireplace mantle. And then when she passed, we had then 2 urns, and my aunt wanted to keep them. And then when my aunt passed, I had 3 urns, and my uncle wanted to keep those. And then when my uncle passed, no one wanted to keep 4 urns. And so one of the decisions that we made at that point was to intern them all of them in a national cemetery. They were eligible for that. And so my grandmother and my grandfather were interned together, and my aunt and uncle were interned together. And then when my dad passed, we had already been out there at the National Cemetery, and he was like, this is a beautiful place. I would like to do the same. And so it took that decision off of us, and it let us know what his guidance was, what he preferred. And that really made it a lot easier for the family. And something else you can do, and this is kind of a little bit morbid, but write your own obituary. That was one of the hardest things that we had to do, is to write obituaries for my grandpa and my grandma and my aunt, my uncle and my dad. And so it makes it difficult because you want it to be just perfect, but there's always something you find later. It's like, oh, I should have included this, or, oh, I should have written this in there. And so by having that kind of written out already, and then just let them pick a few little, like a special quote or something and plug that in. It makes them feel like they've done something, but you've taken the majority of the work off of them. So that is the homework assignment this time for this month, is to make sure that you have all of these things on file. If you've already done your medical power of attorney, if you jumped in and were good in doing your homework assignment for last month, you already have that. Make sure that you give it to that person that you're appointing as your agent, as well as that HIPAA authorization. And if you've done an advance directive or living will, make sure that they have that as well, so they know what your wishes are. And then discuss with them anything else, whether it's the medical, personal medical journal. Write that out, save it to a drive or like a file that you can share, and make sure to share that with them and keep it up to date. And then discuss what you want done with your remains afterwards. Burial, organ donation, cremation, and then if it's, where do you want that to be? If it's burial or cremation, where do you want that final resting place to be? Do you want it to be local? Do you want to be scattered somewhere? Even though that's not really super legal, but they do have some scattering areas in cemeteries. I know the National Cemetery, they had up here in Fort Sill, they had like an ash area, an ash garden area that you can actually scatter ashes in. So look at all that, discuss it. And next time, what are we talking about next time? Next month will be August, and we're going to be doing our webinar on August 3rd. And we're going to be talking about some of your other stuff, leaving your stories. And this will be like some of the treasures that you have, some really neat stories that you may have, passed down from generation to generation. Maybe your favorite chocolate chip cookie recipe, any of those things that you really treasured and you want to pass along. We're going to be talking about how to do that next time. So until then, take care, do your homework assignment, and we'll see you back here on August 3rd.